Warm greetings. On behalf of W4W Foundation, we welcome you to another session of Friday Waters. The idea of Friday Waters is to make Fridays with fun-filled and yet fruitful activities around water matters. In Friday Waters, you know, we have water talkies, book reading, thesis club, and water arts. And today we are having a special session, which is a convergence of water talkies and water arts. And our guest of honor today is Shyam Benegal, sir. It was really a privilege for me to meet him last week. He's a well-known name amongst every family in the country for that matter. But still, for our session as a formal welcome note, I must provide an introduction to him. So Shyam Benegal, sir, is of course a known name. His biography is worth reading through the time of the session. Because of the time of the session, I will just do a brief introduction of him. As a film director, screenwriter, and documentary filmmaker, he's offered his deep, diligent services to the world of cinema as well as advertisement and society at large. His accolades are innumerable, including many national film awards, Filmfare Awards, and Nandi Award. Of course, we are also aware that he's honored with Dada Saheb Phalke Award, Padma Shri, and Padma Bhushan. Sir, you have made your first documentary film in Gujarati, Ghar Betho Ganga, Ganges at the Doorstep in 1962. So maybe we start a little bit from there and then I take your biography further and we go further.
Sure.
Over to you, sir.
Well, you see, in 1962, around the beginning of 1960s, there was some parts of Gujarat, as you well know, are drought-ridden and very, very little rain there. So one of the things that the government of Gujarat planned was that they had one of the rivers, which is a tributary of Narmada. They wanted to move it towards.
This meeting is being recorded.
Yeah. So it's what happened there, I don't know.
Nothing, sir. The recording just started. Sorry. I'm so sorry. Please continue. Yeah.
So anyway, one of the tributaries of the, which is Mahi River. Now they wanted, because you see, Gujarat has always had much less rain, and there was always a problem. And so one of the things was to get to something like Anand, for instance, the district of Khera district in Gujarat. They wanted, there was not enough water there. And Khera is a place where you actually breed animals, cows and buffaloes. So much of our milk, for instance, Amul milk comes from that part of the world. So anyway, one of the things was that they had to take the water there, and then it was very important that they had enough water. Otherwise, the drought was desertification. The problem was of desertification. There was a lot of desertification happening throughout Europe in that part of the world, and so the idea was to stop that from happening. And the only way that could be done was taking some of the waters of Narmada, which are on waste, onto those districts. And one of those districts was Khera. The Khera district, and I was making up on the district of Khera, essentially. Because I was also doing things. I was in advertising at that time. And in advertising, one of our clients was at Gujarat Cooperative Milk Marketing Federation. And that is GCMMF, and who produced Amul, Amul milk and Amul, various milk products of Amul. So the whole thing was to introduce that part of the world and see what kind of difference it would make. Because you see, there were some wonderful people there who were trying to see that the desertification will not take its toll by allowing the whole thing to become a desert. So that's why the Dharmata waters were being taken there. And, and one of the rivers, of course, where it used to go dry 6 months of the year, which is the Mahi River. Now, when this was happening, I became very conscious of this, this whole business of water and the requirement of water, because you found these women, village women, who would be traveling, maybe 6 kilometers, 7 kilometers, sometimes 10 kilometers, to just bring back pails of water, 2 or 3 potfuls of water that to last them through the day. So this was the situation was very dire, very difficult. And in a situation like this, the whole idea was to turn it around. And Dr. Kurian particularly, and the people connected with Amul, they were the kind of driving forces, and we managed to do this this particular project, Mahi River project, and that's when the film was made, the documentary was made. We said, what should we call it? It was filmed in Gujarati. So Ghar Betho Ganga was the idea that you would get them. You at home, you're getting Ganga to your home. Yeah. So that was the whole idea, and it made a huge difference because, as you well know, I mean, today when you talk about Amul and so on and so forth, we automatically assume that the situation was always like this. There was always milk surplus there, etc. But it wasn't like that at that time. It was the beginning of 1960s. It was pretty difficult. And whenever you had a drought year, or you had several drought years at that time, and this would happen. So the water would be needed, and so you had to have a regular supply of water. So Narmada waters were used for that particular purpose. And that's how that documentary was called Ghar Betho Ganga.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. You have worked on many sponsored documentaries and advertising films. Among your documentaries and short films, I must mention your early documentary, A Child of the Streets, and a feature-length rendition on Charan Das Chor. I mean, I was probably just born when Charan Das Chor was done. You have also taught at the Film and Television Institute, FTII, Pune. I recall when we were talking about the training, when we had met together, you were quite positive about the way the new generation actors are really looking at acting as a career, as well as filmmaking has really advanced a lot. Many of your films, for that matter, is like a everyday household especially for my generation and the generation senior. Films like Ankur, which was Record as a parallel cinema, Nishant, Manthan, Bhumika, Junoon. I can go on and on because I have seen all these movies. Mandi, Sardari Begum, Zubeda, for that matter, Suraj Ka Satwa Ghoda, another really interesting movie. And of course, some biopics which you have done on Netaji as well as even Satyajit Ray. Then you have also ventured into TV serials like Yatra for Indian Railways and Bharat Ek Khoj on Pandit Nehru's book on discovery of India. And another important addition which you have done in the recent time is Samvidhan for Rajya Sabha TV, which really tells us about the making of the Indian Constitution. Interestingly, among all these films and all, I had just started working on my PhD on water governance when this film of political satire, Well Done Abba, was released. Ever since then, this has become an important film for me to really talk about water governance all around. But what I see through your films if I look at from the film right from the beginning, you have been really working around something called feudalism and capitalism, with highlighting how common citizens really work their way around this kind of a difficult society. And as a governance scholar, I really see that as a very interesting way how you really portray these things, how people find their way out and all. And that some definitely has come out quite well in the film Well Done Abba. So I have two questions on this. One on governance itself, like how do you really find it fascinating to elaborate on, how common people, citizens really find their way out through this feudalism and capitalism, which is very much now ingrained in the society.
Well, you see, one of the essence, one of the essential things of a democracy, are people's participation in their own lives, and not leaving it to the other, not always think that the government should be responsible for everything else. So I think, when the people's participation comes into the picture, then you find that the change becomes much quicker. Of course, that doesn't become less difficult, but it becomes much quicker, certainly, because the difficulties there will always be. But the important thing is that consciousness is important. You see, the fact that you should be conscious, and you should also realize that without your participation, it's not going to be half as good.
Yes, absolutely. You
Yeah.
nailed it.
So it was important. And this was one of the earliest of films that Ghar Betho Ganga was one of the earliest, because everything else came afterwards, because this was when I was still working for an advertising agency. And and we found this particular subject, and it became very popular. You see, where it was being showed, particularly in Kerala district, it became very popular. The film was in Gujarati, by the way. You know,
Yes.
yeah. So it was it worked well, and then they automatically, I think, they started to feel that I'm capable of making films of this kind, and so films division used to often ask me to make films on one thing or another, which dealt with change in society. So because immediately after this film, I made a film on tribals of Muslim,
Yes.
communities, and their whole life and how it was under threat, of, it kind of would become eliminated over their individuality, their many of their ways of dealing with life, because you require where they live and the manner in which they live, you would require a lot of initiatives on your own part, to be able to make it a livable and enjoyable life for yourself. And this doesn't really require, the government's intervention in everything. And it's important that it's done that way. So I think that was really basically what it was. And so many of my documentaries after that have dealt with this kind of subject in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah, very well put. Because I was about to say that many of your, in fact, most of your films, if I leave aside the documentaries and advertisements, have really touched the core of the Indian citizenship or citizenry, if I may ask. So, coming to the Indian citizenry, let me ask you a little funny question for you. Shyam Benegal, being an individual, have you ever faced water crisis? And did this really worked on the film Well Done Abba? And if you have faced water crisis, how did you work around it as an individual or a citizen, a common
I've
citizen?
faced it because you see, I grew up in a place called Alwal, which is a little temple town, it's a few kilometers out of Hyderabad. Now,
Yes.
there was no water supply. There was no water. There was no municipal supply of water. So everybody had their little wells, in their own homes. They had little wells that they had dug. Now, there were a couple of years when there was not enough rain, and those were drought years, and the water became, absolutely alarmingly low. There was hardly any water. So we used to be very, very careful of our use of water, and and wait and sort of, hope that the rains would come. and pray for it in many ways, and have different kinds of kind of aartis and so on and so forth at the local temple. And now that's when one realized how important water was. You cannot function without water.
Absolutely.
Yes, and you have to have what happens whether you like it or not. So that was the situation. And then that led to this, afterwards.
Yeah, interestingly, when we see the film Well Done Abba, Boman Irani sir has played very well the role, how he really gets around this, bureaucracy or babudam, we can say, and still gets his work done with the same rules which are coming on our way as common citizens to solve our water crisis. So I mean, I'm just curious, was there any particular events or occurrences, because most of your films are based on life occurrences which either you have experienced or your acquaintances have experienced. So how did the Well Done Abba film appear to your head, or how did it go about it?
Because it is based on a real life situation. Well Done Abba is based on a real life situation. It's a true story actually, to event that took place. And it was on the basis of that I decided that I was going to make a film. Because it had humor, it had a lot of things.
Yes.
And also, most important was that you see the bureaucracy, which is supposed to help you, in fact,
Yes,
comes in your way.
absolutely. That's the fun part.
Yeah. So
And the irony.
it becomes even those people who have the initiative in order to help themselves find it very difficult to function because the government bureaucracy comes in the way. So that was one of the reasons for making the film in the first place. Because a lot of our problems, for instance, our everyday problems can be sorted out if we only had if the bureaucracy worked with, according to the needs of the people, rather than
Absolutely.
think themselves on how people should function.
Absolutely. In fact, when I'm teaching, and because of which I reached out to you, because I teach water governance, whenever I'm teaching, I'm always saying that water crisis is actually manipulated and manufactured through the systematic process of, let's say bureaucracy in this case. So my next question to you is a little bit more interesting, probably personal also. But I have noticed when I'm reading about you, especially when we have agreed to make this conversation, that you have always thanked your wife, Neeraji, and your daughter, Pia, in your public conversations. When I think of this and link it to women and water, we are all aware that women face the brunt of water crisis, be it for family or for her own needs. Do you think in our patriarchal setup, we have done enough to get the burden off the woman for many matters, including the water matters?
But because you see, the primary role that is played, particularly in terms of water usage, is actually women of the house.
Absolutely.
I mean, without their participation in it, it wouldn't really work. And that's one of the things. So if I thank them, that's because they deserve those thanks. It's a very simple thing. Now, also, you see, because these are certain fundamental things which
Yes.
you don't, as males, you don't need to confront, because the women in your family do. They have to confront this day in and day out, and that's why, when you realize how much there is, how much they really have to worry about and concern themselves about, it is there you realize that what is the problem for the men? What is the deal for male? He just goes out and does some work, brings back some money for his expenditure through the month. But beyond that, it's not quite the same because here women have to do all the work.
Yes, absolutely. But are we going to change this at some point in time? There's a famous African proverb, the one who carries the load of the water knows the value of the water more. And when we see the water sector, we are still in a situation in a country as well as in the world where there are more men deciding about water and also putting women in the vulnerable position and deciding for them. But I think we keep it for next discussion some other time when we discuss water and women at length. Maybe we take up a little question on your forthcoming film, because when I met you, we had a long discussion on, the making of the film Mujib, or let's say Mujib, making of a nation, and where you are really talking about highlighting the famine also at some part of the film. So maybe we would like to hear if it is allowed or possible for you to share.
See, he's the Sheikh Mujibur Rahman actually was
Yes.
the father of the nation of Bangladesh.
Yes.
So it's his story is very, because I mean, when India, Pakistan, and East and West Pakistan were formed after partition, you know, and
Yes.
they were much part of it. He was very much part of that. But he
Absolutely.
suddenly realized that, you see, even when you do something like that, you can still be disadvantaged, because you see that, for instance, Bangladesh is, as you know, in terms of it's a land of many rivers.
Yes.
Yeah, and it has it grows a lot of food. Three crops minimum in a year. Now, in a situation like this, when you still have levels of poverty
Yes.
that were experienced by them, and when the major famines took place, particularly in the early 50s and so on and so forth. But that apart, the important thing is that that was left disadvantaged for a long time, and therefore there was a certain amount of need for politics to play its role in trying to balance that with West Pakistan, you know.
Yes.
And at that time, there was no question of that separating itself. It got separated into Bangladesh because what was required for them was never met. They were being exploited like any colony was being exploited.
Yes.
Yeah, so this was the problem. And that's why you had somebody like Sheikh Mujib who took over the leadership and decided that eventually you will have to be on your own.
Own.
Yes, and the no question. So that's how Bangladesh was formed.
Yes.
Otherwise,
Absolutely.
there was no reason for it to separate itself, because in 1947, when there was this division between India and Pakistan that took place, at that time it was part of East Pakistan. you know. But
Yes.
then this nation of Bangladesh actually was created because it became necessary. And in this, I think the role played by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was a very, very important one. And yeah, although there was a lot of lives that were lost, lots of things happened, you know, lots of sacrifices made, but eventually it did become a free nation on its own.
Yes.
And that was the story we were going to be telling. And it isn't as though it's a totally accepted by everybody. But for instance, people in West Pakistan continue to think that Sheikh Mujib was not a person that they would really, would have liked to see, in the sense that for the role he played. because they see him as somebody who divided Pakistan.
Yes,
But
definitely. Yeah.
actually, when you think of it, what happened was a natural process.
Yes.
Yes,
If we look at the historical events.
and so it had to be like that. So it did. But his life is fascinating because there was no question about it, that he was a true patriot in so many ways. And then you see there was no question of, because one of the problems that Bangladesh, which had a much larger population group compared to West Pakistan.
Absolutely. It is still among the high density.
And that was never taken into consideration by West Pakistan.
Yes.
But that became a very serious issue. And then, of course, he thought that also, why were they not? If they are majority, why are they not speaking in the language of the majority?
Yes.
And the language of the majority was Bengali. You see, so you had what one might call a whole Bengali nationalism that developed in the process.
Yes.
You know, so it was part of that new Bengal Renaissance, let me put it that way, because the revere people like Rabindranath Tagore,
Yes.
Chatterjee, and a whole lot of all the great writers of Bengal and thinkers. They have taken them as their peers. So it's a very interesting land. It makes for a very interesting film because Mujib himself was a very fascinating human being.
Absolutely. Interestingly, when we talk about Sheikh Mujibur Rahman or Bangabandhu sir, it comes synonymous with for us, when we think about Rabindranath Tagore, or Tagore, as many people call him, because they grew up together, and both Bengal, East and West Bengal, was facing similar kind of issues. It was just the cultural, communal aspects which brought. And what is more interesting, because of this water conversation we are having today, what was seen as a famine eventually turned out to be a new nation born, a movement for famine, and which brought a new nation for Bangladesh. But ironically, both India and Bangladesh, and even Pakistan for that matter, the water worries which were there then still exist. And in fact, it has exponentially risen to many, I will say, moons, because somewhere we can think that we have not really managed our water well, or maybe we have not managed to signal the society about the water issues and all. In that aspect, how do you see art like cinema and advertisement and documentaries can be more robustly used, to create an environment for social change? How can we really make society realize that there is climate change, there is water crisis, and we have to behave more responsibly? I know you have been doing exemplary work on this field, but just to give a message to younger generation and all, how can these mediums be more robustly used? That will be my question. And probably then we take more questions from the participants, because they must be also eager to ask you questions.
Anyway, the important thing here, of course, is that you see, here was Sheikh Mujib who created a nation. Now, but not only just creating a nation, it made a huge difference in terms of the economics of the place, in terms of the levels they could take their population, in terms of poverty reduction. So
Yes.
many, all those things wouldn't have happened if it wasn't an independent country on its own.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so those are some of the things that happened, and I think that tradition goes on just now with Sheikh Hasina there.
Yes.
And there's a certain kind of tradition that is forming, in all this. Because, consider another thing about Bangladesh is that you see it gets these cyclonic weather, quite frequently. You have often you have very terrible situations there. For instance, where people get, where rivers move away from where they were originally. Now, those kind of things, what happens, this houses people, and a lot of the villages that normally go underwater, you have a problem of that kind as well. But
Yes.
but the fact is that despite all of that, it's still a thriving country and thriving economy. And also you see one of the things about that is India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, is the fact that Bangladesh, on the level of what they produce, it's among the most productive of all the nations of South Asia.
Yes, the entire South Asia for that matter.
Yes, amazing. And because things are done at home as well. Everything is produced on different levels. Not everything
Yes.
is in factories. People's homes become factories. So it's a very productive society.
Yeah, interesting. So I would like to ask my last question to you. How do you think we can use this medium of art and cinema to convey to the society this alarming climate crisis and water crisis? And do you think we are doing enough?
Well, you see, a film can do so much. It isn't as though it can persuade everybody to change overnight. This does not happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
No.
and not meant to happen. But it is supposed to make you conscious of a lot of things which you otherwise wouldn't be very conscious of.
Yes.
You would concern yourself with these things, but you must realize that you need to concern yourself. Otherwise, you really will not change, and you will not be, capable of dealing with the kind of challenges that will come your way almost every day.
Absolutely. So, thank you so much for answering my questions, but I'm sure all the participants must be also eager to ask some questions. So maybe I request participants to raise their hands so that we can basically take few questions from you all to ask. So there is a question in the chat box, Anuja from Anuja Bali. So Anuja, would you like to ask yourself or should I read it for you? Go ahead. I know you would like to ask. Go ahead.
I would love to ask. Hello, Shyam sir. It's a privilege. Um, मेरा question है कि we have made so many films on social issues, and when we watch it, it really touches the heart, and we feel very sad. But do you think these films have been able to make that much required and much needed impact on the people's behavior? And what should change, and how can we actually, disturb them that they take action towards the better?
You see, you mustn't forget that a film it's not there as a kind of, it's not, it doesn't compel you to do anything. What it does do is orient you to what you should be doing. In other words, it tries to make you conscious of the kind of problems that you and I face. That's the job of the film. The job of the film is not for you to get converted overnight to the point of view of, that will never happen. But what
Yes.
does happen, of course, is that you will have people, who will, you live in an atmosphere where you have to see the inevitability of change in order to better your lives. And if people can accept that, Otherwise, what happens is we are creatures of habit. It's a habit that makes us not do anything. You have to get out of that habit. Because yes, of course, you need to get out of that habit and start to learn to do things new. Things that you may not have tried before. You have to, and this is a constant process. It's not something that it can be left, because it can't be left. It requires your attention.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Thanks, Anuja. May I request Shobit to unmute himself and please ask your question.
नमस्ते श्याम सर।
नमस्ते।
नमस्ते मानसी मैम। मैं सर देहरादून से बोल रहा हूँ, शोभित। सबसे पहले तो सर आपके लिए 2 शब्द कहना चाहता हूँ सर, कि बच्चे के तौर पे मैंने जब सबसे पहले भारत एक खोज देखा तो शायद आपके जो सिनेमा था उसने ऐसी लत लगाई, ऐसा एडिक्शन लगाया कि उसके बाद शायद कोई दूसरी चीज पसंद ही नहीं आई सर। अगर मैं ये कहूँ कि आप जैसी साधना सर भरत मुनि ने नाट्य शास्त्र लिखने में की रही होगी, वैसी साधना सर हम आपके सिनेमा में देखते हैं। आपने जिस तरह से हिंदी सिनेमा को जो एक दिशा दी है सर, उसके लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सर, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सर। मेरा क्वेश्चन है कि हम देखते हैं कि इन्वायरमेंट हो, क्लाइमेट चेंज हो या वाटर क्राइसिस जैसे जितने भी इश्यू हैं सर, ये डॉक्यूमेंट्रीज में तो बहुत दिखाए जाते हैं, लेकिन जो हमारा मेन स्ट्रीम हिंदी जो सिनेमा है उसमें कोई भी इस तरह के इश्यू के साथ हम कोई भी स्टोरी नहीं देखते। ऐसा क्यों होता है सर? धन्यवाद।
देखिए, you cannot leave many of these problems to the government. The government has a lot of things to do, but it can't deal with everything. But people themselves must do. There are certain things that you can help yourself. Your communities, the community in which you live, can help itself. Now that is very important. Matlab, how much people's participation is there in changing your own life? Now that is very important. And I think this consciousness is not there automatically. It comes, but most of us would like to leave it to the government to handle all these problems. But the fact of the matter is that the government can't handle everything.
Yes.
You have to yourself do a lot of things. And also, you have to, by doing things for your own, on your own, you also bring it to the knowledge of the government, consciousness of the government, that these are the real requirements of society. And that's what is very crucial and important.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You are really nailing it so hard that it's we the people who have to be part of the governance process, even through your films. You have been constantly showing that around, as we discussed also, through the feudalism and capitalism, how common citizens find their way out. Let us take one more question. I see Dr. Nivedita Sahu, I think she again from Hyderabad, by the way. Nivedita, you may switch on your video and mute yourself and please ask your question. Nivedita, yes, go ahead. Okay, I think she lost connection. So Fazia, maybe you may take your question now. Please unmute yourself. Please unmute.
Yeah, Mansee, thank you very much. In fact, thank you very much, Shyam Benegal, sir. Very, very inspiring as always. In fact, already, what I wanted to say, the previous person had asked, like social issues, which we see. So while the industry perhaps, does look at a lot of social issues which are there, but perhaps, do you think the industry as a whole can come together or at least in groups and pieces when it comes to protecting our environment or raising voices which are, I know there are ambassadors who are there, but can we have a larger film industry come together and bring in a very strong voice when it comes to protecting our environment and protecting our resources? Because it's a very resource intensive, film industry is a very resource intensive place. I'm assuming that it must be using a lot of disposable items as well there, with a lot of environmental footprint. So do you think there's a possibility that the industry can do something with regard to?
See, the industry does as much as it can, but you cannot leave it to the industry. And you cannot leave it to the film industry, just as much as you cannot leave anything to anybody. You have to rely on your own self. Absolutely. In other words, we have to learn to not only rely on ourselves, but to function as a unit, as a unity. That's very important. That we should see the problem as not just yours or mine, but ours. And this kind of consciousness is very difficult to achieve. It's not the easiest thing to achieve, because most of us lose it if it doesn't. It personally is of no kind of immediate interest to us. But the fact is that it would be important for your community, for where you stay, for the circumstances in which you are placed. All this is very important. Now you how to get it done, how to get this whole thing working properly. Now this has to it needs a certain kind of consciousness. That consciousness is, it says that there is nobody else in the world. You have to help yourself. There's no question of saying leaving it to other people. There's nothing you can leave to other people. You have to do it. It seems difficult. It is not. Because you have to have enough people who think like you. The point of getting them together. And even if you can't get them together, it's like one of the famous Rabindra Sangeet song, Ekla Chalo, Ekla Chalo. It's like that. It doesn't matter whether other people come or not, but you know that this is the direction you have to take.
I agree, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a lot of students here, but I guess they are not really gathering enough courage to ask you questions. But we go to Professor Vibhu Nayak. And if there are any questions from students, we will take it. Otherwise, this will be the last question for the session. Vibhu, over to you.
Mansee, thank you so much, sir, for such an inspiring talk. Always we look forward to your work for inspiration. So I won't take much time in talking about all that. But sir, I have a question. So films influence us in many different ways. Our hairstyles, our clothing, even how do we propose our girlfriend, or everything else. How do we there are movies on the guest at home, so it influences us in many different ways. So do you think the films can also influence the way we look at the nature? Because somehow I'm quite hopeless at this point in time. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
No, but the fact is that, you see, there is a certain amount. Many of us, a lot of us are influenced by the things that we don't even know that we are being influenced. Because you have to be, the important thing is that there has to be a certain amount of consciousness that can be brought about. Now, it's not easy. It's among the most difficult things, because as I said in the beginning, we are all creatures of habit. And to shake us out of our habit is not the easiest thing for anybody to do. But we know that if something does not change, and you don't change it, there's nobody else will. So it's important that you have to at least be conscious of the fact that you have to take the first step, and other people will, whether they like it or not, be part of it. It may not happen immediately, it may not happen in the next 2 years, but it will happen at some stage or the other. The important thing is to be absolutely honest in what you're doing.
Thank you so much sir, for this very nice words that we have to be just honest in what we do. And I think my students are really listening to this conversation very carefully, because you are going to answer my questions in the class, because you are not asking questions now, because this session was dedicated for you. And I see that none of you are asking questions to sir, and later you are going to tell me many questions. So this was a golden opportunity for you. Any burning question from any student, I will take it. Otherwise, I'll do the vote of thanks.
Mansee, Dr. Nivedita is back. So if she had a question, I think she'd raised her hand earlier.
Okay. Yeah, I see Nivedita. Nivedita, would you like to unmute yourself and ask question?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Mansee. And thank you, sir. Shyam sir, your spiritus talk, and really it is very motivational for us. And I think together with technologists, researchers, environmentalists, and the extraordinary film industry persons like you, we can do n number of things and n number of lot of benefits to the society. Here, just I want to one request. If you have this all whatever yours are this film and in local languages, I think that way we can reach more towards to the populations, whether they are in the rural and all, and we can also touch to their lives, where we can inspire also to towards the water conservation and lot about our biodiversities and many more things about the nature and how to protect the resources, how to utilize in a proper way and minimize the wastage, sir. That is just my way of thoughts. But of course, I need your blessings and support to go many more things to produce for the society, sir. Thank you very much. And thanks a lot, Mansee.
Thank you.
I agree with you.
Thank
you have to. Because you see, we are a country of great diversities. We have enormous diversities, and we have any number of languages, sir, and any number of dialects. So the fact is that not everybody knows every dialect of every language.
Yes.
For instance, I don't know, but you speak Tamil at home, Telugu at home. What language do you speak? Whatever.
Odia.
You see, because whatever the language you might speak, there are so many different variations of that.
Yes, sir.
It's not so simple as to say, yes, I speak Telugu, and so everybody speaks. Not true.
Yeah.
Because it's very different. Like, say, for instance, the kind of Telugu spoken in Telangana is different from the one in the Godavari, Krishna area, It's a completely different kind of speech and manner of delivery and so on and so forth, and the kind of words that are used. And the same thing, because you see, the language I speak at home with my parents is Konkani. Now, Konkani it may not have any written, it's not a written language.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and although it is not a written language, there are any number of variations. Because the kind of Konkani that is spoken, that is in Goa, is very different from one that is spoken in Mangalore, or even that which is spoken in Cochin, for instance. It's like that. So and we are very complex people. We are not a very simple, straightforward people, because we are what Nehru once said. We are like a palimpsest. Many cultures, one on top of the other. And not everything has been wiped out from before. So we are an accumulation of many different colors, and which is the source of our richness, actually.
Yes. I think this collective milieu of our culture and language and all kinds of, I would say, diversity which we have really makes our country rich. There are other sides of it, but then we can discuss that at some other moment. But I know you had only promised me 40 minutes, and we have gone past that time. So I think now not take any new questions from anyone and do the vote of thanks for you, because I am also aware that it's exhausting for you to do such long conversations. So let me do the vote of thanks for all of you as well as for you, sir, and then we can call it off for the day. So thank you all the participants, first of all, for gathering here today, and also all my team members, because of whom actually these sessions become meaningful as well as motivating. So let me also announce the next sessions. So please join us next Friday Water sessions on Thesis Club on February 17th, when at 5 p.m. when we go to the Himalayas with a PhD student from Sikkim University, Kabindra Sarma, to talk about natural springs. And the next Wednesday on 15th of February at 5 p.m. again, we start a series on riverscapes with ICOMOS, and it will be hosted by Nishant Upadhyay from Dharatal, Lucknow. And do keep checking our website www.w4w.in for more information. And now my last thanks goes to Shyam Benegal, sir. It has been wonderful experience, and I hope you also enjoyed the conversation. And I recall 10 days ago when I met you, I was really, really trying to convince you to have this conversation, physical and online. And now I know you have agreed for both the conversations. So I really look forward to having a live conversation also with you at some point in time. But giving us time today and also answering all the participants, questions and all, and also spending time with us. We are really grateful for this, and thank you so much again, sir, for taking out time for us and also thinking about us. Thank you so much.